Security and privacy are front and center as Apple CEO Tim Cook is fiercely opposing a federal judge's order. So the order to unlock the iPhone used by one of the San Bernardino shooters.
At San Bernardino, a very important investigation to us. We still have one of those killer's phones that we have not been able to open. It's been over 2 months now. We're still working on it.
14 people were killed in that attack in December. Apple's Tim Cook publishing a statement on the company website. So I'm going to read it to you now. The U.S. government has asked us for something we simply do not have, something we consider too dangerous to create. They have asked us to build a backdoor to the iPhone. We can find no precedent for an American company being forced to expose its customers to a greater risk of attack. For years, cryptologists and national security experts have been warning against weakening encryption. Doing so would only hurt well-meaning and law-abiding citizens who rely on companies such as Apple to protect their data. Criminals and bad actors will still encrypt using tools that are readily available to them. Former U.S. Army Green Beret officer Ben Collins is here, along with Liz MacDonald and attorney Philip Segal. Welcome to you all. Ben, I am going to start with you. Tim Cook is saying he cannot provide this backdoor software to this particular iPhone. Do you think he's telling the truth?
I do not. I mean, I've been watching today because I'm certainly not a tech expert, but I know enough to be dangerous, and I think a lot of the bloggers are going back and forth. Now, it comes down to software and firmware and hardware of a phone. So those are the three things. The software is what you update every time you upgrade your operating system on your phone. Firmware is something that's semi-permanent. Now, the reality is what they're trying to breach right here is what's in the firmware that blocks or that dumps your data after you try a number of times with an incorrect code. So they could probably have a group of interns sit there typing a code for the next 50 years.
They could put people on this.
Correct, but everybody at the FBI would probably pass away before we actually got to that code. So what they're trying to do is to be able to get a backdoor into that software and that firmware and utilize a computer system to actually run the codes to break this thing. Now, I think that what Tim Cook is not saying is that, could Apple, if on a case-by-case basis, Apple actually had the phone in their hands, could they, write a script, write the code for software and a firmware to actually breach that and run this? Yes, absolutely. I mean, they've got some pretty smart people at Apple. I think they can figure out how to do it.
I would say so. Liz, you've been reporting on this story all day. Do we have to choose as citizens between privacy and security?
Well, yeah, that's the issue. And what the government is saying is that the terrorists in the San Bernardino massacre, which also injured 22 people, that they were hoarding bombs, that they were basically had a lot of military hardware in their garage. And a month and a half prior to the attack, the iCloud account attached to Syed Farook's phone went dark. So during that period, there's a concern that he was communicating with possibly other terrorists to harm even more people. And the government is saying they only want his iPhone. The iPhone is owned by the San Bernardino County Public Health Department.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like underline, underline, underline. It wasn't his phone.
And his employer is saying, yes, FBI, you can access it. Yes, Apple, we give you permission to access it. They basically are saying, too, that prior to 2014, Apple was helping the government to crack into its iPhones to catch suspects, and that, they work with banks to do terrorism financing investigations.
They certainly do.
Why isn't Silicon Valley playing ball?
Philip, picking up on where Liz just left off, what is the legal issue? As Liz points out, it was not Syed Farook's personal cell phone. It was California or municipality's property. And this idea of fighting the court order on principle, I heard, and I'm sure you did too, more than I did, Tim Cook, there is no precedent for a U.S. company being asked to hand over this kind of information or this kind of capability.
I just don't buy it. If these emails were at an internet service provider, the internet service provider would say, here you go. If the evidence were in a hospital and it were sensitive medical records, the hospital would say, here you are. The government is always balancing security and privacy. That's what the Fourth Amendment is supposed to do.
But don't you feel like we are in a new world order now?
I don't think so. I think in 2014 it was not this way. As Ben said very correctly, no one is asking for the right to crack every iPhone all the time whenever they want. They're saying, Apple, you have to tell us how to unlock this phone so that the NSA can hack away at your encryption if it wants to, without erasing everything. Because now Apple has made it so that if you have 10 incorrect attempts to get into the phone, it's
But you heard Tim Cook say, look, you know, we're not going to do this, and anyway, terrorists are still going to continue to communicate.
Terrorists, of course, will still continue to communicate. You're always going to try and have to be one step ahead of the terrorists, but terrorists also communicate by email, by text. It doesn't mean you stop going after emails. It doesn't mean you stop listening to phone calls, getting wiretaps with a court order. It doesn't mean that.
Right. The issue is that Apple and Google built their brand reputation since 2014 on encryption, on privacy. This is after the Edward Snowden controversy. So, yeah, the issue is will Apple be required to give software to the government to act as a master key, to unlock all devices? That's what Apple's Tim Cook is saying. The government's saying, no, 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 we just want access to this one iPhone.
All right. And Ben, you're in agreement, obviously.
Look, I am, and I think it's obviously a legal issue. But in my mind, like this isn't trying to overstep due process, right? Like pre-crime and trying to figure out if somebody is going to do something.
No, murder's already happened.
They did it. They're guilty. They're terrorists.
Yeah. Okay, well said. We are going to leave it there. Ben Collins, Elizabeth MacDonald, Philip Segal, thank you all.